Weather's day to day, week to week, month to month, and weather's pretty hard to predict.
Is it going to happen? When's it going to happen? How serious is it going to be?
The climate is changing. We're seeing more severe storms, and more severe storms occurring more frequently.
California's coastline is more than 1,000 miles long, and more than 600,000 Californians live within a quarter mile of the coast. While much of California's coastline is cliffs, there are low-lying coastal areas that are particularly vulnerable to coastal flooding. The impact from coastal flooding by either storm surges, hurricanes, or tsunamis can be devastating. Lives, homes, businesses, and infrastructure are all at risk of coastal flooding, with massive potential for social and economic losses.
A lot of people do say that it's never going to happen to me. Like in Denver, they said, oh, they'll never get the 1% chance storm. Well, they got the 1,000-year storm over there. And so it may happen.
Coastal flooding in California is pretty widespread, and it can happen from a number of different processes. It can be really high tides. We've got El Nino events. Relatively infrequently, we've got hurricanes on the West Coast. More infrequently, we've got tsunamis that hit the West Coast, but those don't happen that often.
Everybody talks about the 100-year flood, which is a flood that has the 1% chance probability of occurring in a 1-year period.
But it doesn't happen every 100 years. It could happen twice in 1 year. And what we are finding in terms of probabilities is climate changes, probabilities of things are changing. There's been some recent reports that say what used to happen every 100 years is now happening every 20 years. What's adding to this is sea level is rising. So any of these coastal hazards, whether it's these very high tides, whether it's El Nino event, whether it's waves and high tides, every foot sea level rises brings all that closer to the shoreline. Raises the elevation, moves it further inland. So what might have been a 100-year flood 10 years ago might be the 50-year flood a few years from now.
People are going to live near the coast, and it is important to remember that there's a certain responsibility that goes along with that.
You don't have to be right on the sand, but if you're low-lying, you're exposed.
We want people to understand that they are at risk, whether they're actually in an area that's designated as a high-risk zone on the map, or perhaps they're located even nearby.
We now, with our information on ocean observation, can predict an El Nino. And that's probably one of the major hazards we face along the coast in terms of coastal flooding. The 1983 El Nino was the biggest in California in 50 years. We know 33 houses were destroyed, 3,000 houses and businesses were damaged, and we had 230 million in losses.
First step in getting your family ready for coastal flood or any hazard is to find out what your hazards are, specifically where your home is.
What elevation is your house at? What's happened in that neighborhood before, and what do I do to avoid that happening the next time to me?
A prospective homeowner or someone who's actually lived in a home for many years really should take the time and effort to do some research. Start maybe with the FEMA map, but I would say go beyond that.
Go online and find county, state, and federal sites that allow you to put your address in, and they'll tell you exactly what your threat is from a coastal hazard like flooding or tsunami. Once you know what coastal hazards your home is exposed to, it's really important to then have a conversation with your family. Learn about the hazard, whether it's coastal flooding or tsunami, learn what you need to do to be safe, and then talk as a family about your family plan and how you're going to make sure that you're safe. That's your highest priority, is your family's safety.
Each member of the community really has to prepare themselves. They have to take the initiative to ensure that they are properly prepared, that they have their emergency contacts together, that they have emergency food and water located in their homes or in their cars, that they know the evacuation routes to take, they know where high ground is. You need to know your community. You need to take those initiatives.
People who practice their evacuation drills and think about tsunami hazard in advance with their families do very well in real tsunami events and have a much higher chance of surviving uninjured.
When they tell you to evacuate in the coastal areas, you got to listen.
I think everybody has to take responsibility for their own life, their own home, their own family, and should be aware if you're living on the sand that there's a risk you need to be aware of.